Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. You are watching Just Law. We are discussing criminal matters with a touch of human rights. I have Wajahat Sharif, who's going to assist us with those matters. He has extensive experience dealing with these kind of things. And we are sort of talking about the effect of recent changes in law upon the Muslim community. Before the break, we were discussing about how the duty to sort of keep an eye out for certain characteristics, for certain behaviors, being extended to the schools, to GPs, and to others in the community. So the policing has been expanded to include service providers. And of course, they have a, would you say they have like a catch-all process where then they selectively pursue matters? Because before the break we were discussing, if you oppose certain things this society promotes, whereas in Islam those things are regarded as being haram or forbidden. So there is a, if you like, there is an overlap on things that are good on both. But there are certain things in Islam where we say, right, that's not right, that shouldn't happen. And then this society somewhat celebrates certain things, for example, same-sex marriage.
Yes.
And so that sort of aspect being put into the community, giving teachers, GPs, etc., an extra heightened sort of sense of they need to keep an eye out for it.
Yes.
I mean, in practice, they don't pursue everybody, do they?
No, the way the provisions operate, in effect, it can criminalize or it can target all Muslims, whether you're a Brelvi, whether you're a Deobandi, whether you're a Salafi. All Muslims can be caught under the umbrella of these provisions, but it's the actual operation, the way the authorities choose to apply the provisions, and they will usually go for individuals, families, members of certain groups that are well known for doing a certain type of dawah, for example, making pro-jihadi, extreme political statements and comments very publicly, doing broadcasts. It's specifically targeted against those type of individuals, those groups who are regarded as extreme, counter-democracy, counter-pluralism, and putting forward certain entities now that are existing in the Middle East, we say.
Right, so there is
such as the Islamic State.
So there is a designation that this would be a terror group, and any affiliation or any promotion or any sympathy with their beliefs or with their ideology, I think is the word being floating around.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, my understanding is most Muslims want to live under an umbrella which governs by Islam.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying what's happening over there is or isn't. But that sentiment of wanting to live under Islam, would that come under scrutiny? Or
unfortunately, it would. Making a statement such as, I want to live under Sharia, I don't want to live in a democratic society, would immediately brand you or label you as an extremist.
Right. But you'd have to go out there and mention it somewhere, or some sort of forum or somewhere public.
Unfortunately, now, in the scenario you may have heard of, inspectors going into certain schools in East London, asking Muslim students questions. Do you want to live, something along the line that you want to live under Sharia or under democracy, and students innocently answering, live under Sharia. Such students coming under particular attention. There have been instances of those that have attracted publicity. So those are the kind of issues that we're facing, and we need to be alert to them and be able to deal with them.
So if someone's a parent, I mean, is there a particular thing they can do to sort of, okay, the government, the police, they've come up with certain measures.
Yes.
Should the Muslim community then be aware of those measures?
Yes.
And then act accordingly?
Yes.
You know, people shouldn't be walking into errors or mistakes or doing things.
And this is the purpose of programs such as this, to increase awareness that, putting it bluntly, the state, the authorities regard religious devotion as a route to extremism, if not extremism, and extremism as a route to terrorism, religious violence. And unfortunately, these terms, these labels are becoming clear, unclear.
Unclear, okay.
And they're merging into one another, so that if you read in a paper that an individual is an extremist, often the layperson on the street will interpret that as meaning he's a terrorist, whereas he isn't. He just holds orthodox, basic Islamic views. And that's something that we as Muslims need to be aware of. As parents and as citizens, so that we're better equipped to deal with it, and certainly to protect our children.
In terms of sort of traveling abroad,
yes,
certain countries are of particular interest to airport authorities, to the police, etc. Is there any particular thing they can do before they travel? I know individuals who work in the police force. They have a particular sort of format. They have to inform certain individuals that they're going to a particular country, so that they're not taken through that process of, seeing if they're actually going to relocate or what the purpose of their visit is.
yes.
From your experience, would you say, can you do things prior to your travel so that you don't go under their umbrella, or you don't, there's no suspicion over your trips?
Well, if you have already come to the attention of the police and security services, let's say you have experience of having considerable contact with them, it's always wise to inform them beforehand that you're going to a particular country in the Middle East for a legitimate reason. There is a practical reason for this, because you could get to the airport, you get stopped, you could get questioned, you would inevitably be delayed, and in many cases you'd miss your flight. Now, of course,
so inconvenience, also the cost
there's also
element.
inconvenience, but there is another issue, because the police officers at ports do have the additional power of taking away the passport.
Right, so they're not just preventing you from traveling on this occasion,
Yes,
but subsequent as well.
absolutely. If they have suspicion that you are going for a wrong reason.
So you have to convince them that what you're going for is a legitimate,
of course,
in their view. All right, let's turn to the phone lines. Assalamu alaikum. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Wa alaikum salam, bro. My name's Noor.
What's your question, brother?
Bro, basically, I got accused falsely for assault and threat to kill. And saying that I want to go abroad and fight for certain organizations, but they're all false accusations.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was they arrested me for assault and threat to kill. And they raided my house.
So hold on, where were you traveling to?
No, I wasn't traveling to anywhere. I'm going to Hajj inshallah next month.
Oh, you're going Hajj next month, and they've come and raided your house?
Yeah, basically, I was going through a divorce, you see, because my wife's from back home.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a long story, but cut it short for you.
Mm-hmm.
Going through divorce, and my wife was accusing me. She's from back home, and she's on a spouse visa, you see. And I said, look, I want a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Then she falsely accused me of hitting her, assaulting her,
mm-hmm.
and threat to kill. So then they come and raided me, they come arrested me, they took me in,
mm-hmm.
and they said, look, yeah, did you assault and all that? Look, the evidence. I said, look, yeah, no, I didn't do nothing. And I said, look, I don't need this to be fair, because, this is all false.
Mm-hmm.
But then, while I was in the interview, they said, oh, look, you want to be a martyr, you want to go here, you want to go Syria, you want to go do all this stuff for life. Also, I just said no comment and all that because they twisted and turned. I was just wondering,
mm-hmm.
Because I've been arrested and then I don't know what to do. Should I get a solicitor
mm-hmm.
or what should I do?
Is this where it is at the moment?
Sorry?
Is this where it has reached at the moment? You had your first interview and you gave no comment.
Yeah. Well, I answered about the assault and threat to kill. And
okay.
I watched a couple of news
I'll put your question
to
to Wajahat because he has experience on this issue. Any other questions or any other things?
I was just wondering what should I do to help me, because it's also, they said I assaulted her and she said I did some nasty stuff to her, but the only picture she's got is on her elbow. She's got a little mark on her elbow.
Okay, khair, that's fine. Inshallah, we'll address that. So the caller basically has a situation where his wife, she's from abroad, she's come over here, the relationship has faltered, she's on a spouse visa, and he wants to end the relationship. And so she has made allegations against him, and I think she spiced it up to add a few more things, saying he wants to be a martyr and he wants to go abroad, etc. He has had the first interview and he gave no comment. Now, we can't really comment on whether that was the wise thing to do or not. Perhaps at that sort of stage, he should have had lawyers who gave him advice as to how to do this. But, you know, it is what it is. What would you say to people who get accused of these things and there is no actual substance behind it? I mean, the police have a duty to investigate, don't they?
Of course.
So this brother's house, they've raided the house. They tried to collect certain things.
Yes.
And I'm in no doubt they would have asked him, right, do you want to be a martyr? Do you want to go abroad? Do you believe in Sharia, etc.? So a person who faces this situation, what should they do?
It's an unfortunate situation, and I have every sympathy for you. The system in this country is such that any individual can make a complaint against another person, and the police are duty-bound to investigate. That's the general principle, that's a general rule. Unfortunately, in this case, it was your wife, so the police are going to take it slightly more seriously. Although it's coloured by her own selfish interests, and being an immigration lawyer, you'll know that in cases
those
such
things
as this,
do happen.
These things happen, they are
she does
coloured.
have some bruising, so there is some grounds.
Absolutely.
But I think what makes it particularly damaging and sort of, in this brother's case, he's being accused of certain things which he probably had nothing to do with. So if it was a simple domestic violence issue where she said, look, you know, he hurt me on my elbows, police wouldn't have taken maybe such a robust action. They maybe wouldn't have raided his house. You know, so they've actually taken, I would say, prompt and extreme measures, because they just don't know whether they're dealing with a genuine case where they need to do that, or a case where it's just a disgruntled wife trying to sort of...
We shouldn't laugh, it's disrespectful, and do apologise.
Yes, of course.
Usually, as a general rule of thumb, in all cases, all criminal cases, they are heavily dependent on evidence, proof that a crime has been committed. In this case, the wife has presumably made a statement that my husband is an extremist and X, Y, and Z. The police will conduct a raid to get hold of devices, computers, tablets, smartphones, to see whether the person in question does have extreme interests, whether he, and it's usually he, has been viewing videos online, has been downloading lectures.
So they want to see the mindset of that individual and see if it fits what they've been alleged to have committed.
Yes.
But isn't that the job of the police to gather evidence once an allegation has been made?
Well, the allegation has been made by the wife, and that's why
that's neither here or there. I mean, if your neighbor makes a phone call. There was a case where 3 individuals shared a flat.
Yes.
And one of the flatmates, sometime later, he reported his 2 other flatmates as being extreme. And they were raided and they were processed and everything. And it transpired all this was false. And the person making the complaint, I think he got 2 years prison sentence for wasting police time and taking the other 2 through what must have been hell, you know, being processed like that. So there is counterbalance. If you make false accusations and if you go to a certain level, then the police also may, you know, pursue that person for wasting their time. And it might be in public interest not to have false allegations. You know, we have limited resources, and people who make false allegations are wasting those resources.
Of course, but we're living in a climate, in a social atmosphere where it's highly charged, and the police and the authorities are quite sensitive to allegations or assertions that someone is an extremist or someone could pose a social problem of some kind, and they will investigate. the police and the authorities will not sit back and risk that person being the problem. They will thoroughly investigate once the allegation's made. And the counterbalance is that should, as a result of the investigation, the person being investigated be found to be not a problem at all, the person who made the complaint, the complainant, can then be pursued.
But I think that there's a high threshold for that. So if
Yes.
the suspicions had some merit,
Yes.
it won't be in public interest to pursue that person. But if
Yes.
it was totally malicious, then of course there is grounds to do that.
Yeah.
The police have a duty, don't they? Because if something has been reported, some allegations have been made,
Yes.
and they have failed to act, then later on they will be blamed for not acting on intelligence,
Of
on
course,
reports.
yes.
So it's a difficult balance, isn't it?
It is an extremely difficult balance, of course. It's a highly charged environment. It's a very political situation as well. And if you look at it from an overall policy position, no government can be in power and have a major terrorist atrocity take place during its term. It'll be a complete failure of one of its primary objectives.
Or at least they have to be seen to be doing enough to deal with matter. Let's turn to the phone line. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
What's your question, brother?
Bro, yeah, what it was like, you know, my wife, she's in Pakistan, and she applied for a spouse visa. And when you apply in Pakistan, there's a requirement for English language course. So there's two elements, one's speaking, one's listening. So she was refused the entry clearance by the UKBA, saying that one of the certificates was when they verified the certificates with a big institution in England, they couldn't verify it.
Right.
When I came back to England, they gave me right of appeal. When I came back, I contacted the institution. They said accidentally we had sent your wife 2 certificates on 2 days. So they gave me an email saying that basically our system printed two certificates, and there's transcripts that come with the certificates. I've got the transcripts from the institution. It's like a examining board. So I'm going to appeal. Now, what are the chances of my appeal being successful if I can prove that the institution actually gave the certificates and my wife, they're actually saying the certificate was produced, it's a false, basically you produced the certificate, but that certificate was given by the institution.
Okay, well, I've understood your question.
Saying, yes,
I've understood your question. I will be brief because today we're talking about sort of criminal stroke human rights matter. But I will give you an answer, inshallah. Generally, in a situation like your situation, you have to make a decision whether reapplication is appropriate. Because if you go for appeal, it can take 6 to 9 months. And then maybe take another month or 2 for them to provide the visa to your wife. So my advice would be, what are your interests? How urgent are matters? Could a reapplication fix matters quickly and promptly? There is a fee of around £1,000, so you have to consider that. Going to appeal, 9 months wait. If you do it yourself, you're looking at £140 court fee. If you get lawyers, it could be quite a substantial amount. So you need to make a sort of judgment on that. My advice would be to lodge an appeal and to seek a reconsideration and see if that fixes it. But it really depends on you how urgent it is. If it's really urgent and you're happy to pay the £956 fee, fine, go ahead, make a reapplication. Do remember when you reapply, they may say no for a different reason, but hopefully they won't. If you want more information, inshallah, write to us on our email address and I'll respond to you. Thank you for your call. Wajahat, so we are talking about criminal and human rights matters. Muslim community are under immense pressure.
Yes.
I wouldn't go far as to say we have an identity crisis, but we do have an issue where the authorities have a duty to protect their citizens.
Yes.
They have a duty to prevent certain citizens taking steps which may even lead to certain death, because Syria, as you know, is under attack.
Yes.
So if you don't get killed by the rebels, if you don't get killed by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, you probably end up dying under the American bombing. Or you may survive, but from the British perspective, you going over there cannot really produce any good. That is their view.
Yes.
And so they have to take a stance where we don't have children going over there to Turkey, to Syria. And so they must do something. but at the same time being so intrusive where teachers, GPs, etc. are looking out for certain things. So would you say there's a mismatch where they're looking for something that's too wide? I mean, how do you get the balance?
Well,
really, it's a difficult balance. I mean, from a Muslim, if I was to advise the government, I would find it difficult, because you can have somebody who has not been practicing Islam for all their life. Suddenly they have inspiration and suddenly they become religious. Because as far as I can tell, a lot of the individuals that make it to the limelight, shall we say, when you look at their past, they weren't particularly religious. So it's a difficult task, because you don't know who is who until it's too late.
Yes, it is difficult. But my experience is that the intelligence services and the police, they are particularly well informed. They do have extensive networks within the communities. They have established contacts in mosques. They look at high-profile individuals in the community, people of influence, people who are active on the internet, on Facebook, on social media, on
so that's a window into the
forums.
person's mind.
Absolutely.
And if they have certain views.
Yes.
Would you say that if you are dedicated to Islam, if you're a devout Muslim,
Yes.
is there an inherent risk that you will be viewed as being extreme?
Yes. I mean, inevitably, if you are a devout, if you're a practicing Muslim, according to the present definition under the prevent policy, you are an extremist.
Right. So this includes opposition to homosexuality,
Yes.
dealing with riba, perhaps,
Yes.
banking system, having that desire that Islamic Sharia should prevail or should
Yes.
be available.
Absolutely.
But how do you work around that? I mean,
You
it is
can't.
not a Muslim country after all.
Of course, you can't. This country works under a parliamentary democracy. We are citizens, we have the right to vote. Some Muslims believe in participating in the system, others don't. It's an issue that needs to be addressed. It's something that...
Would you say
we need
the
to look
Muslim
at.
community is really built to address the issue? Because I find every year the
Yes.
Islamic knowledge is decreasing, and perhaps the new generation, they don't have the cultural strength. So if someone has come from abroad, they've come from a Muslim society, they
Yes.
have a, shall we say, cultural Islamic identity.
Yes.
Whereas if you're brought up here, you've lived all your life here, especially if you're not a sort of person from a heavily Muslim populated area,
Yes.
then you don't have the cultural identity and you don't have the knowledge. Then you are, in a way, you are Muslim, but you don't know Islam. And then when you do learn about Islam, it may be seen as extreme.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying the government is trying to de-Islamize people, but is there an element of trying to make people less religious, or?
I mean, it's a question of perspectives and positions. From one perspective, you could argue that the government is trying to make Muslims less Islamic. On the other hand, it could be argued from the government's perspective that they're trying to integrate the Muslim community more. And
Britain is no different. I mean, even in Muslim countries,
yes,
they have similar policies.
Yes.
I think in Southeast Asia they passed certain laws
yes,
making a similar sort of stance on the Islamic sort of. They sort of tally violence, but when you look into it, it's not violence. It's more about ideology and your beliefs and what it is that you want.
yes,
So there should be a distinction between physical violence and someone having a particular view.
yes.
And I think sometimes that gets lost, isn't it? Just because you hold a view doesn't necessarily mean you will end up doing something bad.
Of course it doesn't. I mean, if we look at the statistics, if we say that the Muslim community is close to, let's say, between 2.5 to 3 million in this country.
The UK, okay.
And those who have committed offences that can be characterised as true terrorism, that is, violence coupled with the Islamic ideology, they number in the hundreds or low hundreds, even in some cases just over 100. It's a fraction. You're talking about less than 1%.
How much influence would you say is to do with the media sort of blowing it out of proportion to present it as a larger problem than it actually is? I mean, obviously, any crime that is committed is not about the number.
Yes.
Or the number of people injured or whatever the case may be.
Of course.
The government still has a duty to protect. But would you say the media is actually making matters worse? And the recent developments, you know, migrants from France trying to come to the UK.
Yeah.
Only today I read one of the headlines saying that British way of life would change because of the migrants coming over. Is that sort of political scaremongering, or is there real tangible evidence to support that? I mean, if their culture and if their way of life is strong, yes, migrants coming in should really adopt rather than change.
I agree with you. I mean, one of the reasons probably why the migrants come here is because they admire British values, the quality of the life, the strength of the inherent systems of establishment and civil society in this country. They want some order in their lives.
They have firm belief that if they can't come here, they can establish themselves.
Yes.
They can better their life.
Yes.
Why would you risk life and limb to go to a place if you didn't have that firm belief in your heart that if I go over there, I mean, I don't want to call it the British dream, but yes, that's pretty much what they have.
Of
and
course,
some people are willing to die to get here.
Yeah, they want education for their kids. They want to know that they're living in their home and it's not going to be bombed the next day or something like that.
I mean, people coming from Syria, they have this issue, isn't it? And if someone claims that they're from a particular area of Syria, under immigration sort of rules, I think Syria enjoys a blanket sort of thing. They won't necessarily process it too much. They will give them, it's almost like if you can prove you're Syrian, your immigration is likely to succeed.
Is that your experience?
They will give you refugee status, because right now, deporting someone to Syria isn't really an option.
Well, of course.
Libya sort of came and went, Yemen came and went, but Syria is firmly, if you can prove you're Syrian, you're pretty much here and you're here to stay, and people can't see any end to the fighting. So if there was an end, then perhaps they can send these people back to Syria. And sometimes it's difficult because if they come here, they settle, they establish themselves, going back really isn't an option.
Yes.
But more into what it is that, say, we as parents or we as people in the society who are perhaps in the know, what things can we do? So keep an eye on as to what your children are watching online, what activities they're doing, but that's difficult because they may have a mobile phone, they may be messaging people, it might be just child play. I mean, they're saying things they don't mean.
Of course, it's a problem.
So how do you deal with that?
Parents, as far as possible, should try and interact with their children. And
so know what they're getting up to.
Really, they should know what they're getting up to, who they're mixing with, and particularly be alert to online activity, viewing of, say, for example, the popular internet medium, YouTube, where there's a lot of films, videos, and footage available of, say, operations abroad in Syria and Iraq. Viewing such material will immediately put you under the microscope as far as the authorities are concerned, because they take a very narrow view of an interest in such things. And in their eyes, the only interest is because you're interested in terrorism and you're an extremist. Unfortunately, whereas young people are curious. They want to find out themselves naturally what's going on in the world, far beyond what conventional media makes available to them.
But surely the intelligence services, the police are wise enough not to pursue just mere viewing. I mean, there has to be more to it than that, right? I mean, I think there was one video which was viewed by 7 million viewers.
Yes.
And it was entitled Islamic State.
Yes.
So 7 million people have seen it. Now, let's assume 200 countries on the planet, apply averages.
Yeah.
You will still end up with 35,000 or 3,500 from Britain.
Yeah.
So does that mean all those individuals will be pursued? And I think
well, they won't be pursued necessarily, but
so there has to be more than just mere viewing. There has to be some sort of
it's a number of features,
some sort of pattern, something that leads you to a certain route.
Of course, yeah. Generally, if you're a young person, particularly if you're a young man, you've recently become apparently more religious. That is, you started wearing traditional clothes. you've grown a beard, you become interested in going to the mosque. You even develop an interest in going abroad to Middle Eastern countries to learn Arabic, to learn the Quran and religious studies.
But all those things are
and
good
also
things
in
to
politics.
do. But of course, you have to keep an eye out that you may then raise interest from the...
The thing is that these are, I can say that they're base or platform factors which are neutrally described as indicators towards radicalization. You become more interested in Islam, you become more practicing, but as far as the state's concerned, you become possibly
greater
more
risk.
Extreme. So it's open to interpretation, and it's different perspectives again, using that expression.
Okay, so if someone is a student, so
Yes.
their parents should know how the technology operates, what things they're doing, etc. If someone's traveling abroad, then they should be more specific as to what their objective is, what it is they're doing. You know, we have last 1 minute. What would you advise the viewers to do in terms of learning more about the law, in terms of keeping an eye out? What things can they do?
Well, that's a difficult...
I mean, I would say to children not to put something online, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. You know, don't put silly things on there that's going to draw attention and present you as somebody that you're not. Because, you know, in law, it's not a joke.
No,
you know, whatever you say, whatever you do, if it's an offense, it's an offense.
Absolutely. We are living in extremely difficult times, and there's no one answer to this very important question. But parents should try and interact more with their children. They should try and monitor what their online activity is, particularly if they're spending a lot of time on the computer.
We must end here. Jazakallah khair for Wajahat Sharif. Thank you for watching. That's all we have time for this week, inshallah. I will see you next week. Until then, look after yourself. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.